When you've worked your whole life to provide for your family, the last thing you expect is for your own child to treat you like a burden. My name is Edward Miller. I'm 72 years old, and I thought my daughter Claire would be the one person I could always rely on. I raised her with everything I had after my wife passed, poured my pension into her education, her first apartment, even helped with her wedding. But life has a way of showing you the truth about people, and sometimes, the truth cuts deeper than any knife. One winter afternoon, Claire drove me to a place I thought was a doctor's office for a checkup. I trusted her. I always trusted her. But when we pulled up, I saw the sign on the building. Maplewood Senior Living Facility, a nursing home. She smiled like nothing was wrong and said, "Dad, this is for your own good. It's time you stop worrying about bills and let professionals take care of you." But here's the thing. Claire wasn't doing this out of love. She was doing it because of my pension. What she didn't know was that the manager of that nursing home already knew me, and what unfolded next would turn her little scheme upside down. I wasn't born with much, but I learned the value of hard work early. My father worked in a steel mill until his hands were cracked and blackened, and my mother stitched clothes for neighbors to help make ends meet. When I came of age, I followed in Dad's footsteps, 35 years at the same manufacturing plant. The work was hard, unforgiving, and left my back stiff by the time I was 40. But every week when that paycheck landed in my hands, I knew exactly who I was working for: my family. I met my wife, Margaret, at church. She was the kind of woman who could light up a room with her smile. We had one daughter, Claire, and from the moment she was born, I promised myself she'd never go without. I wasn't a rich man, but every Christmas, Claire had gifts under the tree. Every birthday, she had a cake with her name on it. I worked overtime shifts to put her through college, even when Margaret's health began to fail and the hospital bills piled up. When Margaret passed away, Claire was 21. I thought her mother's death would draw us closer together, and for a while it did. Claire would visit often, calling me just to check in, sometimes bringing me dinner. She even said, "Don't worry, Dad, I'll always take care of you." Those words carried me through many lonely nights. After the plant closed, I retired on a modest pension and Social Security. It wasn't much, but it was enough for my quiet life. My days were simple, tending to my garden, fixing up little things around the house, and waiting for Claire's visits. But over time, her visits became less about me and more about money. She'd ask how much my pension was, whether I had savings, what bills I had left. At first, I thought she was just worried about me. But then the questions turned sharper. "Dad, don't you think it's risky keeping everything in your name? What if something happens to you?" I brushed it off, telling myself she was just concerned. But now, looking back, I see it clearly that wasn't concern. That was planning. People look at an old man and see only the wrinkles, the slower steps, the tired eyes. What they don't see is the lifetime of sacrifices etched into every line, every scar, every ache. I wasn't born wealthy. My childhood was one of hand-me-down clothes and meals stretched from scraps. My father worked himself to the bone at the steel mill, his skin permanently blackened with soot, his knuckles scarred from years of machinery. My mother took in sewing work from neighbors sitting at the table late into the night with a lamp burning low, just to put bread on the table. From them, I learned what it meant to give everything for family. And when my own family came, I swore I'd do the same. I started at the manufacturing plant when I was 19. It was grueling work, the kind that leaves your body stiff and your clothes smelling of oil long after the shift ends. I stayed there 35 years. 35 years of aching muscles, missed holidays, and nights where the only thing that kept me going was the thought of my wife and daughter at home. Margaret, my wife, was my anchor. We met at church of all places. She was playing piano during service, and I remember thinking the music wasn't half as beautiful as the woman playing it. She was kind, steady, the sort of woman who made everyone feel welcome. When she said yes to marrying me, I promised her a good life, even if I had to break my back to give it. Together, we had one daughter, Claire. I'll never forget holding her in the hospital, her little fingers gripping mine with surprising strength. In that moment, I made a vow she would never go without, not if I had anything to say about it. Life wasn't easy, but I worked every extra shift I could, just to make sure Claire's childhood was different from mine. Christmas mornings were full of gifts under the tree, even if it meant I had to patch my work boots for another year. Every birthday, I saved enough for cakes, balloons, and a few friends to come over. And when she got older, piano lessons, summer camps, and eventually college tuition. When Margaret got sick, everything changed. The hospital bills piled up higher than the stacks of overtime slips I kept in a drawer. But even as my back ached and my lungs coughed up black dust, I never stopped. I worked and I paid and I kept the lights on because that's what a husband and father does. Margaret passed away when Claire was 21. It was the darkest day of my life. I remember standing in the cemetery holding Claire's hand and feeling like my world had been ripped in two. Claire looked up at me with tears streaming down her cheeks and whispered, "Don't worry, Dad, I'll always take care of you." Those words became my lifeline. For a while, she meant it. She would stop by often, bringing dinner, checking on me, making sure I wasn't drowning in grief. I clung to that bond, thinking maybe losing Margaret had at least brought us closer together. But as the years rolled on, little things started to change. Claire still visited, but the conversation shifted. She didn't ask me how I was sleeping or if I was eating well anymore. Instead, she asked about my pension, my savings, my life insurance. At first, I told myself it was natural. She was just being responsible, making sure I was secure. But the questions got sharper, more specific. "Dad, don't you think it's risky keeping everything in your name? What if something happens to you? Shouldn't we plan ahead?" I laughed it off, brushing it aside. She was my daughter, my only daughter. She'd never betray me, right? But somewhere in those years, I missed the shift. The smile that wasn't quite as warm. The way her eyes lingered a little too long when she asked about bank balances. The sighs of frustration when I said I was fine living on my own. Looking back now, I see it clear as day. Those weren't questions born of love. They were questions born of planning. And one cold winter afternoon, that planning became action. The funny thing about betrayal is that it rarely comes crashing down all at once. It sneaks in slowly, little by little, like a draft in the house you can't quite find. With Claire, the cracks started small. She was in her mid-20s then, building a life of her own. A new job in marketing, a shiny little apartment downtown, the kind of place that looked nice in pictures but cost more than I made in a month during my working years. I was proud of her, of course. Proud she was standing on her own 2 feet. But sometimes when she visited, I noticed her eyes drifting around the house. Not at the family pictures on the wall, not at the quilt Margaret's mother had made, but at the house itself. The square footage, the yard, the kind of things a realtor would notice. One evening over dinner, she dropped it casually. "Dad, have you ever thought about selling this place? I mean, you could move into a nice condo. No yard work, no repairs, and you'd have a good chunk of money left over. Wouldn't that be easier?" I chuckled at the time, waving her off. "This house is full of memories, Claire. Your mom and I built our lives here. It's not just walls and a roof." She smiled, but it wasn't the warm smile of a daughter reminiscing. It was tight, polite, the kind of smile you give when you didn't get the answer you wanted. It didn't stop there. The questions kept coming sharper each time. "How much is your pension again, Dad? Do you have life insurance through the plant? How big is it? What's your plan if you get sick?" I tried to see them as concern. After all, she was my daughter. Maybe she was just preparing for the future. But concern doesn't usually come with a furrowed brow when you say you're doing fine. Concern doesn't make a person sigh in disappointment when you tell them you can manage on your own. And there were the little things too. Birthdays she forgot. Christmas visits where she spent more time scrolling through her phone than talking to me. Times when I'd try to tell her stories about her mother, and she'd interrupt to ask if I'd considered downsizing. I'll never forget one particular evening. It was Margaret's birthday, the first since she had passed. I lit a candle on the porch the way she used to, and sat outside watching it flicker in the cold night air. Claire came by late carrying takeout in a brown bag. She handed it to me, kissed my cheek quickly, and said she had other plans with friends. I watched her car taillights disappear down the street and felt a hollow ache. Margaret had always said Claire had a good heart. And I believed it too for the longest time, but slowly doubt crept in. The real warning came when she started joking. At least I think they were meant as jokes. "Dad, if you keep working in that garden, you're gonna keel over one day. Then what'll happen with the house?" She laughed when she said it, but there was no humor in her eyes. Neighbors noticed too. Mrs. Parker, who lived next door, once mentioned, "Your daughter sure asks a lot about your place. She ever think of moving back in?" I laughed it off, but something about the way she said it stuck with me. By the time I reached my 70s, my pension had become Claire's favorite subject. She'd call me on Sundays, not to ask how I was, but to ask if I was making the most of it. Sometimes she'd slip in little comments like, "You know, Dad, you'd have more left over for me if you didn't waste so much on repairs." That word, waste, stung. Keeping the house, the same one where she took her first steps, where her mother baked pies every Thanksgiving, wasn't a waste. It was life. It was memory. It was love. But Claire didn't seem to see it that way anymore. And though I brushed off every comment, every sigh, every thin smile, a quiet unease began to grow in my chest. I wanted to believe she was still that little girl who once cried when her goldfish died, who used to beg me to push her on the swing until the stars came out. But deep down, some part of me already knew that little girl was gone. What stood in her place was someone else. Someone who saw me not as her father, but as a ledger. A calculation, and it was only a matter of time before she acted on it. The betrayal didn't come with fireworks or screaming matches. It came quietly, wrapped in smiles and soft words, the way a snake moves through tall grass. It was a cold morning in late January when Claire showed up unannounced. I was in the kitchen making oatmeal, the kind of breakfast Margaret used to say would stick to your ribs. Claire breezed in, all perfume and polished nails, holding a coffee cup from one of those fancy cafes that charge $6 for hot water and grounds. "Dad," she said brightly, a little too brightly, "you've got a doctor's appointment today." "I already set it up for you." I frowned. "Doctor's appointment?" "I didn't schedule one." She waved her hand dismissively. "You've been forgetting things lately, Dad. Always tired, always stiff. I just thought it'd be good for you to get checked out. Don't worry, I'll drive you." Her tone was casual, practiced even, but something about the way she avoided my eyes unsettled me. Still, she was my daughter. And when your daughter insists she's worried about your health, what father says no? I grabbed my coat and she ushered me out the door, her keys jingling like a victory bell. We drove in silence for a while, the cold winter air fogging the windows. I asked which doctor we were going to, and she rattled off the name of a clinic I didn't recognize. "New place," she said quickly, changing the subject to traffic and how her boss had been so unfair to her at work. It wasn't until we turned off the main road that I noticed we weren't headed toward any medical building. Instead, the car rolled to a stop in front of a tall brick structure with wide glass doors. A sign out front read, "Maplewood Senior Living Facility." My stomach dropped. "Claire, what is this?" I asked, my voice tight. She parked the car and turned to me with that same too bright smile. "Dad, don't be upset. I've been thinking about this for a while. You've worked so hard your whole life, and now it's time to let others take care of you. A place like this, and it's safe, it's clean, it's professional. You won't have to worry about mowing the lawn, fixing leaky faucets, or paying bills." I stared at her, stunned. "A nursing home? You brought me here without telling me?" Her smile didn't falter, but her eyes hardened just a little. "It's what's best for you, Dad. You can't keep living alone forever. What if you fall? What if something happens and no one's around? Here, you'd be looked after." I should have seen it sooner, the way her gaze flicked past me toward the building, as if she were already picturing me tucked away inside, out of sight, while she rifled through the life I'd built. My voice shook. "Claire, I don't need a nursing home. I need my home. The one your mother and I built. The one you grew up in." She sighed like I was a stubborn child refusing to eat vegetables. "Dad, stop being dramatic. This is for your own good. And besides, think how much easier things will be. Your pension will cover everything, and then I won't have to worry anymore." There it was. The truth slipped out so casually I almost missed it. Your pension will cover everything. This wasn't about safety. This wasn't about care. It was about money. My money. I sat frozen, my hands gripping the seatbelt as she hopped out of the car and came around to my side, tugging at the door. "Come on, Dad, just take a look. You'll see it's wonderful." Reluctantly, I let her guide me inside. The lobby smelled faintly of disinfectant and coffee, polished floors reflecting the overhead lights. Behind the desk, a man in a suit looked up, and when his eyes met mine, a flicker of recognition crossed his face. Claire didn't notice. She was too busy chattering about how nice everything was, how I'd have my own room, how she could visit when she had time. But I noticed, and in that split second, I realized something Claire didn't. This wasn't the first time I'd seen the man behind the desk, and he already knew me. The man behind the desk straightened when he saw me. His brow furrowed for a moment, then his eyes lit with recognition. He stood quickly, smoothing his tie, and came around the counter. "Mr. Miller?" he said, his voice warm with surprise. "Edward Miller. It's really you." I blinked, caught off guard. "Yes, do I know you?" Before he could answer, Claire stepped forward, cutting in with her polished smile. "Hi, I'm Claire, his daughter. We're here to tour the facility and get him signed up. He's ready for long-term care, and his pension can handle the payments. Can we see the rooms?" The manager didn't look at her. His eyes stayed on me, and slowly his smile spread. "Of course I know you. You probably don't remember me, but I remember you. My name's Daniel Harper. I was one of the kids in your neighborhood years ago. You used to fix my bike when the chain popped. And later, when I worked summers at the plant during college, you were the one who taught me how to run the press safely. You probably saved my hand from being crushed." The memories came rushing back, faint but real. A skinny kid with a baseball cap too big for his head, standing in my driveway with a broken bike, a nervous young man at the plant, hands trembling as he learned to handle machinery. I smiled faintly. "Daniel Harper. I do remember now. You were always eager to learn." Claire cleared her throat impatiently, her voice sharp. "That's nice and all, but can we focus on the paperwork? My dad needs to be admitted quickly. He's been forgetful and weak, and honestly, he can't manage alone anymore." Daniel finally turned to her, and though his tone remained polite, there was steel underneath it. "With respect, Ms. Miller, your father doesn't look incompetent to me. And regardless, no one is admitted here without their full and willing consent." Her smile faltered. "But he needs this. I'm his daughter. I know what's best for him. Can't we just sign the papers today and move forward?" Daniel's eyes narrowed slightly. "That's not how this works. We don't accept residents unless they want to be here. And Edward," he looked back at me, his gaze steady, "do you want to be here?" My throat tightened. For the first time since Claire had sprung this ambush on me, I felt a sliver of power return. I straightened my shoulders and said firmly, "No, I don't." The silence that followed was heavy. Claire's face turned red, her lips tightening into a thin line. She leaned toward Daniel, her voice low and urgent. "Listen, I'm just trying to do what's right. He's old, he's stubborn. He doesn't understand that this is for his own good. If you could just process the application, I'll handle the details." But Daniel shook his head. "I'm sorry, Ms. Miller, I can't, and I won't, force someone into care who doesn't want it. Especially not someone like your father. He's a respected man, and I won't ignore his wishes." She stared at him, stunned. "You can't be serious. Do you know how much money his pension brings in every month? Do you realize how easy this would be for him?" Daniel's voice sharpened. "This facility isn't about money. It's about dignity. And I'll thank you not to treat your father like a bank account." Her mouth fell open, but no words came out. For me, though, something clicked. Claire had played her hand too soon, showing her true motive in front of a witness, a manager who not only knew me, but respected me. I could see the frustration in her eyes as Daniel guided us politely but firmly back toward the entrance. He clasped my hand before I left, giving it a firm shake. "Don't worry, Mr. Miller, I've got your back. You're not alone in this." Those words echoed in my mind as Claire pulled me back toward the car, her grip on my arm tighter than before. She thought she could railroad me into a nursing home and take control of my pension. But now she knew she wasn't the only one watching, and she hated it. The drive back home felt like sitting on a ticking bomb. Claire's hands gripped the steering wheel so tight her knuckles went pale. She didn't look at me, didn't speak. The only sound was the heater humming and the occasional slap of the windshield wipers brushing away the sleet. I kept quiet too, staring out the window, my mind racing. The betrayal stung deeper than I expected. This wasn't just about convenience or concern anymore. Claire had tried to put me away like an old coat shoved in the attic, and she hadn't cared if I agreed or not. When we finally pulled into the driveway, she cut the engine but didn't get out. Instead, she sat there, her jaw tight, her breathing sharp. "You embarrassed me," she snapped suddenly, turning on me with eyes like cold fire. In front of Daniel. Do you have any idea how humiliating that was? I blinked, stunned. Embarrassed you? Claire, you tried to sign me into a nursing home against my will. What did you expect me to do, smile and thank you? Her lips curled, the sweetness gone now, replaced with something harder. You don't get it, do you? You're not young anymore. You can't keep living in that house like nothing's changed. Mom's gone and you're old, Dad. It's time to face it. The words sliced through me, sharper than she realized. Old. As if my years of sacrifice, of working, of raising her, all boiled down to nothing more than a weakness to be hidden away. I took a breath, steadying myself. I may be old, but I'm not helpless. I can still cook my meals, pay my bills, keep my house. What I can't do is sit back and let my only daughter treat me like a burden. She let out a harsh laugh, bitter and loud. Burden, please. Do you even know what it's like to worry about you all the time? To think about what happens when you fall or forget to lock the door? You should be thanking me for thinking ahead. I narrowed my eyes. Don't lie to me, Claire. This isn't about worry. It's about money. I heard you back there. You mentioned my pension like it was some prize waiting for you. Her face froze, then hardened further. She didn't deny it. Instead, she leaned closer, her voice dropping low and sharp. Of course it's about money. Do you think raising kids and keeping a job and paying for a mortgage is cheap? Do you know how hard I work, how stretched I am? And meanwhile, you sit on that pension check every month living in a paid-off house, acting like you don't owe anyone anything. My stomach churned. I don't owe anyone anything, Claire. That pension is what I earned. Decades of breaking my back, working double shifts, missing holidays. I earned every cent. And as for the house and your mother and I built our lives here, it's not yours to claim. Her voice cracked with anger. You're selfish. You'd rather cling to that house and that money than help your own daughter? I stared at her, barely recognizing the person in front of me. Help? Claire, I've helped you your whole life. Piano lessons, camps, college tuition. I even helped you when you bought your first car. Don't talk to me about selfishness. For a moment, silence hung between us, heavy and bitter. Then she spat the words that confirmed everything I feared. If you won't do it willingly, Dad, then I'll find another way. She flung the car door open, stomped into the house, and left me sitting in the cold. I sat there for a long time, the heater slowly dying, my breath fogging the air. My chest ached, not just from the sting of betrayal, but from the dawning realization. Claire wasn't going to stop, and I wasn't just fighting for my independence anymore. I was fighting for my dignity. For my life. That night the house felt different. The walls seemed colder, the air heavier. Every corner carried echoes of Margaret's laughter, but they felt distant now, muffled under the weight of what had just happened. I sat in my recliner, staring at the photos on the mantel. Claire's childhood pictures smiled back at me. Missing teeth, birthday hats, prom dresses. I could still remember every detail. Staying up late to sew costumes, saving spare change for summer trips, cheering from the bleachers at her soccer games. And now, she looked at me like I was a checkbook with a heartbeat. For the first time in my life, I didn't feel safe around my own daughter. The thought gnawed at me, restless and sharp. Claire had made her intentions clear in the car. If you won't do it willingly, then I'll find another way. That wasn't just frustration talking. That was a promise. I couldn't sit back and wait for her to act. I had to be ready. So while the house slept and the clock ticked past midnight, I pulled out the old file box Margaret and I used to keep our documents in. I flipped through folders, birth certificates, marriage license, insurance papers, pension details. I needed to think like Claire. What would she target first? The pension, of course. That steady monthly check was her golden ticket. If she couldn't shove me into a nursing home, she might try to get power of attorney, or worse, forge something behind my back. Next, the house. Paid off in my name, and worth far more than what I'd ever need in my lifetime. To her, it wasn't a home, and it was equity, something to sell, split, and spend. The more I thought, the clearer it became. I wasn't dealing with carelessness or desperation. This was calculated. Claire wasn't waiting for me to die and leave her an inheritance. She wanted control now, and if I wasn't careful, she'd find a way to take it. I sat back, rubbed my temples, and whispered into the empty room. What would you do, Margaret? It was then that a memory surfaced, something I hadn't thought about in years. Margaret had always been the planner, The one who tucked away just-in-case money, the one who thought 3 steps ahead. I remembered her telling me once when Claire was still a teenager, "Don't put all your eggs in one basket, Ed. Life changes too quickly. Protect yourself, even from the people you love." At the time, I brushed it off, thinking she was being overly cautious. But now her words rang like a warning bell, so I made my own plan. The next morning, I called the bank and asked about securing my accounts. Password changes, withdrawal alerts, extra protections. The teller on the other end was kind, even offered to flag my accounts for suspicious activity. Then I called a lawyer, not the family lawyer Claire knew, but an old acquaintance, someone she'd never think to check. We arranged a meeting in secret, and I gathered my documents, tucking them into an old leather briefcase. For the first time in weeks, I felt a flicker of control. But I couldn't let Claire know. Not yet. So when she came by later that afternoon, bringing a store-bought casserole and that saccharine smile, I played along. I thanked her, complimented her cooking, asked about her work. I nodded when she gently brought up long-term planning again, pretending to be tired, even confused at times. I gave her just enough to think she was winning. All the while, I was 2 steps ahead, because if my daughter wanted a game, then a game she would get, and this old man had more fight left in him than she realized. If I thought Claire would back down after the nursing home fiasco, I was wrong. Within days she returned, this time with a different approach. No more surprise doctor visits or unannounced tours of senior facilities. Instead, she switched tactics, wearing a mask of concern so convincing that anyone else might have believed her. She came over with groceries, filling my fridge with fruits, vegetables, and frozen meals. She fussed about the curtains needing dusting and scolded me for not drinking enough water. On the surface, it looked like a doting daughter caring for her aging father, but I could see through it now. Every chore she performed came with questions, pointed, carefully disguised questions. "Dad, do you remember where you keep your checkbook? I can help you balance it if it's too much. Have you thought about setting up auto-pay for your bills? I could handle that for you. Oh, these forms from the bank came in the mail. Why don't you let me look them over? It's so confusing at your age." Each word was honey-coated poison, every suggestion nudging me closer to dependence. To someone else, it might have sounded like care. To me, it was clear as day. She was digging, testing the waters, looking for an opening to wedge herself into my finances. I played along. I smiled, I nodded. I even let her take the trash out as if I were too frail to manage it myself. But inside, I was cataloging every move, every slip of her tongue, every gleam in her eyes when the subject of money surfaced. One evening, as she was leaving, she paused at the door, hesitated, then turned back. "Dad," she said softly, her voice dripping with rehearsed sympathy, "have you ever thought about what happens if you can't make decisions anymore? Like if you get sick suddenly?" I raised an eyebrow. "What are you getting at?" She looked down, twisting her purse strap, then sighed. "It's just, maybe you should consider power of attorney. It's smart planning. That way someone you trust can handle things for you." There it was, the wolf finally showing its teeth. I leaned on the doorframe, feigning weariness. "And I suppose you think that someone should be you?" Her eyes flicked up wide with faux innocence. "Well, I am your daughter. Who else would you trust?" I didn't answer right away, letting the silence stretch until she shifted uncomfortably. Finally, I gave a small, tired smile. "I'll think about it, Claire." Her expression softened instantly, triumph glinting behind her eyes. She kissed my cheek, whispered goodnight, and walked out the door, certain she'd planted the seed she wanted. But what she didn't know was that I had already spoken to my lawyer earlier that day. My will had been updated. My accounts were secured. And the house? Let's just say it no longer sat solely under my name. Still, I knew Claire wouldn't stop there. She was too invested, too desperate. She'd push harder, grow bolder, and I was ready for it. The only question was, how far would she go? The weeks that followed felt like living with a shadow at my back. Claire came around more often, hovering, always with that same blend of forced cheerfulness and veiled control. But the more she pushed, the more cracks began to show. One Saturday afternoon, she stopped by unannounced again. I was in the garden pruning Margaret's rose bushes, something I still did out of habit, even though the thorns bit deeper into my hands these days. Claire stormed down the walkway, heels clicking against the concrete, Dad, she called out, waving a stack of papers in her hand. We need to talk now. I straightened slowly, brushing soil off my hands. What's the rush? She thrust the papers toward me. I talked to a financial advisor at work. He said it's irresponsible for you to manage all your assets alone, so I brought over some forms, durable power of attorney. We just need to sign them and everything will be in order. I took the papers, leafed through them, my eyes scanning line after line of legal jargon. The trap was clear. With one stroke of a pen, I'd be handing her the keys to everything. My pension, my accounts, even the house. I looked up slowly. Claire, I told you I'd think about this. Her face tightened. And I told you this isn't optional anymore. You need to do this. I set the papers down on the porch railing, steadying myself. Need or you need me to? Her voice rose, sharp and frustrated. Do you have any idea how hard my life is? I'm drowning in bills and debt. And you're sitting here in a paid-off house with money rolling in every month, acting like you're untouchable. It's not fair. The words hung in the air, heavy and ugly, not fair. As if the years I spent sweating in factories, breaking my body for a steady paycheck, somehow didn't count. As if she was entitled to everything I'd earned simply because she shared my blood. I felt a surge of anger I hadn't known in years. My voice came out low, steady, but burning. You think this was handed to me, Claire? Do you think your mother and I didn't bleed for every brick in that house, every dollar in those accounts? Nothing about this life was fair. We fought for it, and now you want to strip it away because you don't want to fight for yourself. Her face flushed, her eyes glittering with rage. She snatched the papers back, crumpling the edges in her fist. Fine, she spat. If you won't do this the easy way, then I'll do it the hard way. Don't think you can stop me. I stood frozen as she stormed off, heels striking the pavement like gunshots. The roses swayed gently behind me, their thorns catching the wind, and I couldn't help but feel the metaphor pressing down. Beauty hiding sharpness, love hiding betrayal. When the door slammed behind her, I sank onto the porch steps, my heart pounding. I knew without a doubt that we had reached the breaking point. Claire wasn't just scheming anymore. She was threatening, and I realized something chilling. She wasn't going to give up until she got what she wanted, which meant I had to be ready to end this, once and for all. The day after Claire stormed out, the house was eerily quiet. Too quiet. I sat at the kitchen table, the morning paper untouched, a cup of coffee growing cold in my hand. Claire's words replayed in my head like a broken record. If you won't do this the easy way, then I'll do it the hard way. That wasn't just anger. That was a threat. And if I knew my daughter, and I did, she was already plotting her next move, so I decided it was time to plot mine. I picked up the phone and called Daniel Harper, the nursing home manager. He answered on the second ring, his voice steady and warm. Mr. Miller, how are you holding up? Better now that I've got someone I can trust, I said quietly. Daniel, I think my daughter's going to try something reckless. I need to be prepared. There was a pause, then his voice firmed. Whatever you need, I'm here. That gave me a flicker of strength. The younger generation, someone I'd helped when he was just a boy, was now standing guard for me. Life has a funny way of repaying debts. Next, I met with my lawyer, Mr. Whitaker, in his downtown office. A sharp man with gray hair and sharper instincts. He listened without interruption as I laid out everything. The nursing home ambush, the power of attorney papers, the threats. When I finished, he leaned back, steepling his fingers. Edward, you're wise to get ahead of this. What we'll do is simple. First, we'll file a notice with your bank and pension provider. No one but you can make changes, and if anyone tries, I'll be notified immediately. Second, we'll update your will and living trust. That way your assets are protected even if Claire pushes harder. And third, we'll document everything. Every threat, every attempt. If this escalates to court, she'll have nothing but a trail of her own greed. I exhaled slowly. For the first time in weeks, I felt the ground beneath me again. But Whitaker wasn't done. He leaned forward, his eyes narrowing slightly. One more thing. You can turn this around. You don't just have to protect yourself. You can teach her a lesson she won't forget. That sparked something inside me, a fire I thought had gone out years ago. A quiet determination. So we made a plan. Step 1. Lock everything down tight. Every account, every deed, every policy being secured and invisible to Claire's reach. Step 2. Bait the trap. If Claire wanted to test me, I'd let her think she was winning. I'd play the frail, confused father just long enough for her to show her hand. Step 3. Reveal the truth. When the moment came, she wouldn't just lose her grip on my pension or my house. She'd lose the illusion that she ever had power over me. That night, back at home, I sat in Margaret's old rocking chair, watching the shadows sway across the living room. For the first time, I spoke aloud to her photo on the wall. "Don't worry, love. She won't get away with this. I'll protect what we built. And when it's over, she'll finally understand what she's done." The plan was in motion now. Claire thought she was tightening the noose around me, but what she didn't know was that I was already holding the rope. It happened on a Thursday evening, one of those quiet nights when the house seemed to breathe on its own. I was in the den reading an old novel Margaret had loved when the front door burst open. Claire stormed in, her heels clacking against the hardwood, her coat still buttoned, her face flushed. She didn't bother with greetings. Instead, she slapped a folder onto the coffee table so hard the sound echoed through the room. "Enough, Dad," she snapped. "This is happening whether you like it or not." I set the book aside, slowly eyeing the folder. "What is it this time?" "Guardianship petition," she said, her chin lifting defiantly. "I spoke to an attorney. If a judge declares you incompetent, I'll be granted full legal authority over your affairs. That includes your pension, your accounts, the house, everything. All I need is proof you can't handle things anymore." My stomach turned, but I kept my face calm. "And what proof do you think you have?" She crossed her arms, her voice dripping with false pity. "You're forgetful. You're weak. You live alone in a house that's too big for you. I've got neighbors who've seen you struggling with the trash cans, losing your balance on the porch steps. It's enough. Trust me, the court will side with me. They always do when it comes to protecting the elderly." Her confidence cut like a knife. She had thought this through, lined up her lies like dominoes, ready to push them over and watch my life collapse. But she didn't know what I knew. I leaned back in the chair, folding my hands over my lap. "So you're willing to drag your own father into court? To paint me as helpless just so you can get your hands on money you didn't earn?" Her nostrils flared. "Don't make me the villain, Dad. I'm trying to secure the future. My future, your future. If you'd stop being stubborn and sign the papers, we wouldn't have to do it this way." I let the silence stretch, watching her squirm under the weight of her own words. Finally, I said softly, "If that's the road you want to walk, Claire, be prepared for where it leads." She scoffed, mistaking my calm for weakness. "It'll lead exactly where it should. To me taking care of everything. And when the judge hears about how irresponsible you've been, how unsafe this is, he'll thank me for stepping up." With that, she grabbed the folder, stuffed it back into her bag, and stormed out as quickly as she came. The door slammed, rattling the windows. I sat there, the old novel still open on my lap, my heart pounding. Claire had finally crossed the line. This wasn't manipulation behind closed doors anymore. This was war, legal war. But what she didn't realize was that I had been waiting for this. Daniel had already agreed to testify if needed, explaining how she'd tried to force me into the nursing home against my will. Mr. Whitaker, my lawyer, had every document ready. Medical records proving my competence, financial statements showing I was in full control, and even signed affidavits from neighbors who'd seen me shoveling snow and tending the garden without issue. Claire thought she could weaponize the courts against me. But when the gavel finally fell, she'd learned that her greed wasn't just ugly, it was powerless. The courthouse smelled faintly of paper and polish, the kind of place where lives were quietly dismantled with the stroke of a pen. I sat at the long oak table, my suit a little stiff on my shoulders, my hands folded calmly in front of me. Across the aisle, Claire sat with her attorney, a slick-looking man in a navy suit who wore his arrogance like cologne. She looked radiant, as though this was some business meeting she was destined to win. Her smile, however, never reached her eyes. The judge, a gray-haired woman with sharp glasses, shuffled papers as the clerk read out the case. Claire Miller petitions for guardianship over her father, Edward Miller, claiming incompetence and inability to manage his affairs. Hearing those words felt like swallowing glass. My own daughter had dragged me here, painting me as some feeble old man, but I kept my composure. Rage would serve her case. Calm would destroy it. Her attorney was the first to speak. his voice dripping with rehearsed sincerity. Your Honor, this is a straightforward case. Mr. Miller is 78 years old. He lives alone, forgets appointments, and struggles with daily tasks. Ms. Miller has witnessed concerning behaviors, and neighbors will testify that he's unsteady on his feet. She is simply seeking to ensure his safety and secure his financial future. Claire nodded vigorously beside him, occasionally shooting me pitying glances, an actress in her own performance. The judge turned to me. Mr. Miller, do you have counsel? I smiled faintly. Yes, Your Honor. Mr. Whitaker is representing me. Whitaker stood, his presence commanding despite his modest frame. Your Honor, the petitioner's claims are not only exaggerated but misleading. We will provide evidence that Mr. Miller is fully competent, both financially and physically. Moreover, we will demonstrate that this petition is not about care, but about greed. Claire stiffened, her mask slipping for just a second. The judge raised an eyebrow. Proceed, Whitaker began methodically. First, he presented recent medical reports, my blood pressure, my reflexes, my memory tests, all perfectly normal for a man my age. Next, he handed over statements from my bank showing that every check was cashed, every bill paid on time. Then came the witnesses. Daniel Harper walked in, polished in his suit, and when he looked my way, I saw that same loyalty in his eyes. He spoke clearly. Your Honor, I am the director of Maplewood Senior Living. Weeks ago, Ms. Miller brought her father in under false pretenses, attempting to have him admitted without his consent. Mr. Miller was clear and articulate about his wishes, and Ms. Miller repeatedly pressured him, citing his pension as the reason. I personally refused the admission because it was clear she was acting in her own interest, not his. The courtroom buzzed with whispers. Claire's lawyer shifted uncomfortably, but Whitaker wasn't done. He called two neighbors, Mrs. Jennings from across the street and Mr. Patel next door. Both testified they had seen me shoveling snow, trimming hedges, and carrying groceries without issue. He's more active than my own son-in-law, Mrs. Jennings quipped, earning a chuckle even from the judge. Finally, Whitaker dropped the hammer. He produced copies of Claire's earlier documents, the power of attorney papers she'd tried to force on me. Your Honor, these were not only inappropriate but coercive. My client was pressured, threatened, and demeaned by his own daughter, who stands to gain financially if she secures control. The judge leaned back, her expression unreadable, but her eyes flicked toward Claire, who now sat rigid, her face pale. When it was my turn to speak, I stood slowly, leaning on the table. My voice wasn't loud, but it carried. Your Honor, I may be old, but I'm not incompetent. I built my life brick by brick, sacrificed holidays and health so my family, and especially my daughter, would never want for anything. And now she seeks to strip me of my dignity, to bury me alive in paperwork so she can profit. This isn't protection, it's betrayal. The silence that followed was deafening. Claire's lawyer tried to object, but the damage was already done. The judge adjusted her glasses, her tone firm. Ms. Miller, the court finds no evidence of incompetence. Petition denied. Furthermore, this court warns you. Continued attempts to coerce or manipulate your father's affairs may result in legal action against you. The gavel struck once, sharp and final. Claire's head dropped into her hands, her face crimson. I sat back down, my heart pounding but steady. For the first time in a long time, I felt like I had won, but deep down, I knew this wasn't over, not yet. The courthouse steps felt colder than usual as I walked down them, the autumn wind whipping around my coat. People passed by with papers in hand, faces blank, caught in their own battles. But for me, it felt like a war had just ended, at least one round of it. Behind me, Claire followed, her heels striking the stone steps like angry punctuation marks. She didn't look at me at first, just marched forward with her lawyer trailing behind, clearly eager to escape the humiliation inside. When we reached the street, she finally turned. Her face was pale, but her eyes burned. You think you won, don't you? She hissed. I met her gaze steadily. I didn't think. I know. Her jaw tightened, her breath coming fast. For a moment, I thought she might lunge at me right there in front of strangers. Instead, she straightened her coat, forced a bitter smile, and said, "This isn't over." Not by a long shot. I almost pitied her then. Almost. Back at home, the quiet wrapped around me like a blanket. Margaret's photo still sat on the mantel, her smile as steady as ever. I sat in my chair, poured myself a glass of water, and let the exhaustion wash over me. The courtroom had drained me more than I expected. But even in my weariness, one truth was clear. Claire wouldn't stop. The court ruling wasn't a wall. It was just another hurdle for her to find a way around. And so I had to be ready. The next morning, Mr. Whitaker stopped by with fresh documents. We sat at the kitchen table while he explained the next steps. "The will is airtight now," he said, tapping the stack of papers. "And the trust ensures that even if someone tries to contest, they'll get nothing unless you allow it." I nodded slowly. "And Claire?" His eyes softened. "She won't take this well. You know that. But Edward, you've done everything right. You've not only protected yourself, you've put yourself in a position to take control of the narrative." That phrase lingered in my head. Take control of the narrative, because I realized then that surviving Claire's attacks wasn't enough. She had to understand. She had to feel the weight of what she'd done. Later that afternoon, the phone rang. I hesitated before answering, already knowing who it would be. "Dad," Claire's voice was sharp, clipped. "I need money."
"Right now."
"Bills are piling up, and you've made this whole thing impossible. If you don't help me, I don't know what I'll do." Her tone was a mixture of desperation and entitlement, the same cocktail she'd been feeding me for months. I held the receiver to my ear, calm and deliberate. "I can't help you, Claire. Not like this." "You've made your choices," she exploded. "Choices? You're my father. You're supposed to take care of me. After everything I've done for you." I cut her off, my voice steady. "No, Claire. After everything I've done for you. And this is how you repay me." There was a pause, then the line went dead. I set the phone down gently, my chest heavy but resolute. She was unraveling now, her schemes collapsing one by one. And that was when it hit me. This wasn't just about protecting myself anymore. It was about teaching her a lesson she would never forget. So I made the call, not to Whitaker this time, not to Daniel, but to someone else entirely. Someone who could help me deliver the final act of this story, the act where the betrayer learns that betrayal always comes at a cost. After the court victory, the days that followed felt like a quiet before a storm. Claire was rattled, yes, but I'd seen that look before. People who think the law is a temporary speed bump on the road to what they want. I knew she could try again in a different way, more quietly, more cunningly, so I stopped asking what she might do next and started designing what I would do. Whitaker and I met twice a week. Daniel checked in at Maplewood, saying he would testify again if needed and that he'd keep an eye on any further attempts to manipulate admissions or payments. Whitaker pushed me gently toward something I'd never thought to do: take my story public. Not sensational for the sake of gossip, but public in a way that honored Margaret's memory and exposed what had really happened. He argued that sometimes a person needs the community to see the truth to prevent further harm. At first I balked. Public, my private life, our private pain? But Whitaker was right. Claire thrived in secrets. She expected bargains struck in hushed corners where no one watched. She counted on shame keeping people quiet. Remove the secrecy and her advantage disappeared. So we put together a plan that was part legal cordon, part moral exposure, and part careful theater. The idea was this: host a small community event. Nothing dramatic, just a celebration of life and service at the church where Margaret and I had worshipped for decades. Invite neighbors, old co-workers, the people who remembered us when our lives were young and messy and beautiful. Invite reporters from the local paper, not to sensationalize but to document a truth. Elders deserve dignity, and greedy schemes that use care as a cover must be exposed. We'd keep it dignified, we'd keep it honest, but we also made it tactical. Whitaker filed civil notices. Freeze any attempt to transfer assets, notify the pension provider to flag activity, and prepare criminal complaints to be filed should Claire attempt further coercion. Daniel agreed to be there quietly, as someone who could validate the nursing home ambush. And Mr. Patel and Mrs. Jennings, neighbors who knew the truth, agreed to speak. I asked the church to let me speak for 5 minutes about Margaret and the life we built. And then Whitaker would address the assembled crowd about financial elder abuse and the legal steps to protect oneself. I told only a handful of people my full plan. I did not tell Claire. On the day, the church smelled of coffee and old hymnals. the pews filled with people who had watched our family grow. Children whose parents I'd taught to fix bicycles sat beside retirees I'd worked with at the plant. There were reporters. Yes, 2 from the paper, a camera from the local TV station. They were there because Whitaker explained this wasn't a scandal, it was a public service, an elder's warning to others. I started by telling small memories of Margaret, the way she used to hum while folding laundry, the way she insisted we always leave room at the table. Tears came to the eyes of many. It felt right to honor her first. Then Whitaker stood, calm and composed. He spoke about the law and about dignity, then turned to me and said, "Edward asked us to help make an important point. That family can sometimes betray us and that communities must protect their elders." That's when the plan's final piece slipped into place. Whitaker asked the paper to run a short feature about elder exploitation, quoting the legal filings and the evidence we'd consolidated. The reporter asked if they could air a short audio clip as part of the online story. A clip in which a voice, Claire's unmistakably, had been recorded boasting about plans to get things moving and counting on the pension to be handed over. The clip had been obtained legally. It was a recording of the conversation in my kitchen where she'd threatened to find another way. I had not sought to trap her illegally. I had recorded my own home conversations to protect myself. Whitaker reviewed everything and said playing the excerpt publicly was both legal and necessary. I watched Claire from the front row as the audio played. Her face, initially unreadable when the reporter announced the clip, emptied of color as the microphone carried her voice across the room. "If you won't do this the easy way, then I'll do it the hard way. I'll be the one to manage everything. I'll take care of it." Every syllable landed like a small stone. She had intended those words only for me, but now the whole room heard them. The murmurs swelled. People glanced at one another, the look on their faces shifting from sympathetic to disbelieving to cold. Whitaker stood and walked calmly to the front, and at that moment 2 uniformed officers, who had been standing discreetly at the back as part of our legal team's coordinated approach, stepped forward. They introduced themselves to the congregation and asked to speak privately with Claire outside. She walked out like someone walking to a stage performance she thought she'd rehearsed. Instead, she found the detectives ready with the paperwork Whitaker had prepared. Evidence of attempted coercion, recorded admissions, bank attempts flagged by the bank. The crowd watched in stunned silence as the officers escorted Claire to speak with them. She was not taken away in handcuffs on the spot. Whitaker had arranged things cautiously so that everything was by the book, but the message was clear. The community had heard. The law had been notified. Claire's safety net had been pulled away piece by piece in front of her. When it was over, many people came up to me with hands outstretched, with tears, with apologies on behalf of neighbors who hadn't seen the signs. Daniel clasped my hand and whispered, "You did right, Mr. Miller." I thought of Margaret's face and how much she would have hated all this spectacle, and still, I knew she would have understood why it had to be done. This wasn't petty revenge, it was protection, and it was final. The weeks after the church event felt like the world had been turned on its side. Some days the light in the house felt brighter. On other days the silence seemed to swell, full of things left unsaid. The legal wheels took their time, as they always do, but their weight felt assuring rather than threatening. Whitaker filed the civil protections. The bank had frozen any attempted transfers. The pension company flagged any access. The local paper ran the story with care, not shrill, but fact-based, and letters arrived at my door from people I'd known for years. Strangers who had read the piece and wrote to say they'd seen similar things happen and admired my courage. Claire's life shifted in ways that were painful to watch. The immediate legal consequence was a formal investigation into her conduct. The detectives took statements, interviewed witnesses, reviewed records that Whitaker and Daniel had put together. The bank confirmed suspicious attempts to access accounts and had provided copies of alerts and attempted withdrawals. The culmination of evidence led to charges being filed for attempted financial exploitation. It was a cold, crushing thing to see printed on the police report under her name, but the truth had weight and facts behind it. Social consequences came quick. Her circles tightened and then frayed. People who had once smiled and waved found it hard to meet my eyes in the grocery store. Co-workers whispered. A few neighbors, surprised and ashamed, apologized in person, saying they'd had no idea how far things had gone. Claire's phone messages went unanswered. It's an ordinary revenge in a way to watch someone you loved lose status and friends. But this was not about schadenfreude. It was confirmation that when greed crosses certain lines, even the small scaffolding of social life collapses. As for Claire, I did not seek to destroy her. I wanted accountability, not annihilation. We had pushed for community-sanctioned consequences and legal oversight, and the judge issued temporary restrictions to prevent her from contacting certain accounts and required mandatory financial counseling if she wanted to contest the measures. There was also a requirement I asked the court to impose: community service focused on elder care advocacy, with a long-term goal of educating others about exploitation. If she accepted those terms, there would be a path forward. If she did not, the law would take its course. That first winter, after everything fell apart, she came to the house once, and not to plead, but to sit across from me and finally listen. She apologized in a small, hollow voice. "Dad, I'm sorry. I was wrong. I didn't realize how much I was losing." Her eyes shone with shame and real regret. I listened because part of me was still her father, a man who remembers the small girl who used to braid her own hair and bring me dandelions. But I also remembered the months of calculated behavior. "You can say sorry," I told her quietly. "But you need to show it. You need to make amends. It will take time to rebuild anything. If you want that, you'll have to work for it, and not for what you can take from us, but for what you can give back." She nodded, and for the first time I saw the weight of understanding, not a sudden redemption, but the raw start of one. For me, life after the storm settled into a quieter rhythm. I returned to the garden and the small acts that steady a life. Wiping the kitchen table, tending the roses, putting Margaret's teacup back in the cabinet where she kept it. The house didn't feel hollow so much as reclaimed. People would drop by, bringing pies and stories of the plant, of Margaret's old recipes, of our Sunday hammer and nail afternoons when neighbors helped us fix a child's gate. Those visits stitched me back together in stitches gentler than the ones revenge can offer. I also began volunteering just a little. Whitaker suggested speaking at community centers and senior groups about protection, about what to watch for. Daniel invited me to come to Maplewood once to speak with staff. There, in a bright room, filled with geraniums, I told a gathering about dignity and the thinness of trust when money is involved. There was no triumph in it, only a steady, cautious hope that others might be spared what I endured. Some nights I still think of Claire and the life we might have had. Grief for that relationship lingers like an ache. She had choices, and she'd made hers. But I also feel a fierce peace. We protected the home Margaret and I built. We exposed a wrong, and the community that had once been content to look away stepped forward. That matters. And so I wake each morning, make my coffee, and tend the roses. I don't celebrate the fall of my daughter. I mourn it. But I also know I did what I had to do, not for revenge alone, but to honor a life of work and the dignity of an old man who refuses to be treated like an object. In the end, what I wanted was simple: to be seen, to be respected, and to be left with the life my wife and I had made. That is all I ever asked. And now, with the house still standing and the roses still in bloom, I have it.